Muito boa noite a todos. Vamos, portanto, dar início a esta segunda sessão deste ciclo de conferências intitulado Tendências Globais 2030. Aquilo que está em causa neste ciclo, segundo o comissário destas conferências, é realmente determinar em que mundo é que vamos viver em 2030. O título da Conferência 2, Tendências Tecnológicas Globais, um mundo melhor, também tem uma ambição, é de tentarmos desenhar um mundo em que possamos viver melhor. A componente das tecnologias é importante nessa perspectiva. O Dr. Álvaro Vasconcelos vai explicar-vos a justificação desta escolha, desta segunda conferência. Eu limitar-me-ia apenas a agradecer aos convidados desta noite, começando justamente por o meu estimado amigo, professor António Cunha, reitor da Universidade do Minho, da qual eu fui presidente do Conselho Geral com muita honra, uma pessoa com um enorme sentido estratégico e que fez da Universidade do Minho uma das novas universidades, ou seja, aquelas que foram criadas há menos de 50 anos, das mais bem organizadas e com uma excelente performance. O professor António Cunha fará o favor de fazer a apresentação dos dois convidados. Eu, no entanto, queria cumprimentar o Dr. Andrea Ricci, diretor do Instituto de Estudos para a Integração de Sistemas de Roma, e uma palavra muito especial para o professor José Manuel Fonseca de Moura, meu querido amigo, de há mais de 25 anos, que é professor catedrático do Instituto Superior Técnico, mas também há mais de 30 anos é professor na Universidade de Pittsburgh, na Carnegie Mellon University. Ele vos dirá aquilo que andou a fazer estes 30 anos, mas é garantidamente uma das pessoas que mais inovou, sendo natural desse retângulozinho português. Portanto, muito obrigado por terem vindo e muito obrigado a todos. Espero que tenhamos uma boa sessão. Álvaro Vasconcelos.
Muito boa noite, muito bem-vindos a esta segunda conferência deste ciclo de conferências sobre Tendências Globais 2030, os futuros de Portugal, futuros no plural, quer dizer que há futuros alternativos para Portugal, como há futuros alternativos para o mundo. Nós tivemos uma primeira sessão em que muitos de vocês estiveram presentes, mas talvez alguns não tenham estado. Nessa primeira sessão, em 28 do mês passado, 28 de setembro, nós discutimos quais eram as grandes tendências mundiais. Afirmamos que uma tendência profunda hoje, uma tendência que molda o futuro, é o empoderamento dos cidadãos, que é acompanhado por uma enorme difusão do poder. E que uma questão central é a imprevisibilidade, aquilo que chamamos os cisnes negros. Não somos capazes de definir o futuro, somos capazes de compreender as tendências atuais, que sabemos que essas tendências atuais se vão alterar com o tempo. Hoje vamos nos concentrar naquilo que se chama um game changer, ou seja, um fator de mudança ou um agente de mudança que é a tecnologia. Nós sabemos que há uma revolução tecnológica que está a ter lugar, sabemos que ela irá prosseguir nos domínios da impressão a 3 dimensões, no domínio da internet das coisas, no domínio da inteligência artificial, no domínio da biotecnologia. Não sabemos qual vai ser o impacto desta extraordinária transformação tecnológica que está a ter lugar na vida de cada um de nós. Como nós decidimos pôr no centro deste debate sobre tendências mundiais, não os Estados, mas os cidadãos, por isso acrescentamos um mundo melhor, ponto de interrogação. Nós gostaríamos que se discutisse não só quais são as grandes tendências tecnológicas, este fator de mudança em relação às grandes tendências mundiais, que é a tecnologia, mas que se discutisse questões de ética, questões de política, qual é o seu impacto real sobre a vida das sociedades. E é isso que vamos ter a oportunidade de discutir neste painel que vai ser moderado pelo Sr. Reitor António Cunha, professor António Cunha. Muito obrigado, Sr. Reitor. Muito obrigado. E que eu teria que referir. Vou voltar a referir, desculpem ter tido que voltar, mas concentrei-me naquilo que eram as tendências globais e o que íamos discutir, mas queria-vos dizer que para acompanhar este debate, para interagir connosco nesta discussão, nós criamos um painel de especialistas, que estão aqui, os especialistas que fazem parte deste painel. Alguns já temos fotografia, outros se calhar teremos que tirar-lhes uma fotografia para podermos pôr, porque vai aumentando de sessão para sessão mais uma fotografia, mas ainda não temos as fotografias todas. O que este painel de especialistas vai fazer é tentar compreender qual é o impacto em Portugal e nos futuros dos portugueses destas mudanças que estão a ter lugar nas sociedades a nível interno e a nível internacional. E, no fim, isso permitirá fazer-se um relatório sobre os futuros de Portugal. Eu espero que hoje, nesta sessão, já se possa interagir com o painel de especialistas sobre o impacto para Portugal desta discussão que vamos ter. Discutimos muito pouco o impacto em relação a Portugal na primeira conferência. Se calhar era bom que hoje nós pudéssemos ter essa discussão. E muito obrigado ao painel de especialistas, que é formado por especialistas a norte do Mondego no essencial, embora também haja uma especialista de Lisboa, da Universidade de Coimbra, das Universidades do Porto, da Universidade do Minho. E esse painel de especialistas acho que é uma componente importante deste exercício. E muito obrigado aos especialistas por aceitarem este desafio. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado, muito boa noite a todos. I'm afraid we should move to English because it will be the language that we use during this session. Of course, it's a pleasure for me to be here, to be the moderator of this discussion, perhaps let's say like that. I would like to acknowledge the nice invitation from Luís Braga da Cruz and Álvaro Vasconcelos, and to congratulate them also for this very, very interesting initiative. Perhaps we are not going to let this room in the end of the night knowing everything that will going to happen in 2030, but perhaps we will know slightly better what the future will give us, and of course what technology may provide for this future that we believe that will be better than today, because technology has been in fact through the years, and of course mainly during the last century, an important factor in increasing the quality of living, and I think all of us know all that we are able today to benefit from technology. The future will have several technologies, several emerging technologies, and some technologies that we already anticipate, but we don't know exactly how they are going to be. We'll be very lucky because our first speaker, José Fonseca de Moura, will speak about some of those new developments. These technologies will have different impacts, social impacts in the way of living, in the economy, in the environment, and this will be addressed mainly by our second speaker, Andrea Ricci, that is a specialist in that area. This new time that new times, perhaps, of course, I think will be there is one word that is going to be very important, or not very important, one word that I think will be used to characterize what is going to happen, and that word is smart. I think everything will be smart, or we hope that everything will be smart. We'll have smart materials, we'll have smart products, we'll have smart technologies, because even things, products, or simple things will have some, let's say, capacity of adapting to the reality, because things will be connected, even something like a share where you are will be connected to some other system, and things will be able to adapt or to change and to have increased functionalities. But also things will be more customized. Of course, we know that perhaps in the future, pharmaceutical, pharma medicine will be made for a specific genetic structure of somebody. And even perhaps all of our devices, the mobile phone or something similar to the mobile phone, will be perhaps very much customized to the person that is going to use it. Also, things will be, or technology will be more accessible. Things that today are considered as high-tech, like the 3D printers, the possibility of printing something that is in the computer, will be a normal printer that we'll have at our house, and we can make some physical product out of something that we can draw in the computer. And things that some years ago were considered advanced technology will be very, very common and very normal. And just to finish this introduction or these examples, I think also reality will be mixed, because virtual reality and augmented reality will take an important role in our lives, and I think in some occasions we will be puzzled if what we are seeing is what is really there, or is something that is given by some device or some technology. Of course, this will have several implications. Environment is one of them, but also ethics will be a very important implication of this, because and I think during the last weeks, if we go to the automotive industry, we know what the lack of ethics can cause. The other word that I think will be very important in the future will be the open, or openness. Research will be more open, innovation will be open, open access to scientific data, to scientific literature. This will change also the way we interact with science and with knowledge. So this is a new world that we are going to hear and to speak about, and once again under at least two different perspectives. The perspective of someone that is very much involved in some of these developments, and is Professor José Fonseca de Moura. He is a professor at Carnegie Mellon University. In fact, he's a university professor that is, as you know, a special status at Carnegie Mellon, and is the Philip Marshall Dodd University Professor. He's also a member of the US National Academy of Engineering, the NAE, and also a member of other important institutions, including he's a fellow of IEEE, and also of AAS, the Advanced Science Society American. Okay, I was missing the American. Yes, thank you. He's an engineer by training. He has been. He started his career as an Instituto Superior Técnico, and is involved, and he's been visiting professor at several universities, including MIT. His work is in the area of statistical signal and image processing, and now he has been devoted his time and his intelligence to big data and network science. Okay, he has a very, very interesting curriculum and remarkable curriculum. Just to finish, perhaps I would also say that he's chief editor and member of the editorial boards of some of the most important journals of IEEE and of this area of rhetoric and IT technology. And he also received several prizes and awards, both in States and in Portugal. So I think we have the right person to speak about some of the new technologies that we are going to have in the future. So please, José, Fonseca de Moura.
Okay, it's in English. Thank you very much, President da Fundação de Serralves, Engenheiro Luís Brasga da Cruz. Thank you very much, Dr. Álvaro Vasconcelos. And I especially thank you for the nice words, inflated words. And to my colleague, also welcome to Portugal. So I was asked to, so this all started because we were sitting on a Starbucks in New York City about 6 months ago. Luís and I, we were sitting, and Luís asked me, what am I doing? And I start saying things out, and Luís said, okay, that's exactly what you need to come and tell at Tendências Globais, mundo, melhor. And so, to set the stage, I thought, okay, why don't we look at history? Actually, I remember a saying from a person called Abraham Lincoln. He was President of the United States in the period 1860 to 1864, 65. He died in April, assassinated at the Ford Theater. And he said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so somehow, by maybe looking at history and looking forward, we might be able to predict the future. But let's start with the past. Now, the past, of course, for what matters today, is in terms of technology changes, radical technology changes through history. And if we go back enough time, we'll remember that around the mid of the 18th century, there were some developments, the steam engine of Watt, and what's called the cotton gin, which is like the TR, the British, that the UK that came up with it first called it something else, but the Americans call it cotton gin. So there were a bunch of technological changes. The steam engine, for example, gave rise to the trains, and the trains, of course, revolutionized the transportation. And so we look at that period in history. You have a period that significantly changed the course of history. And if you fast forward about 75 years or so towards the end, or maybe 100 years later, you have a second industrial revolution. And in this case, you start with the combustion engine. You have the electricity. You have water and sanitation that, for example, had a tremendous impact on the mortality rate. People learned from the studies of Pasteur that that they had to wash their hands, to boil water, and so forth. So there are significant facts that happen, and that last for maybe 100 years, and that's the world of the 20th century that we know, with electricity, with the first car, the cars, and also the processes, the manufacturing. When Ford invents the production line, it's not just the products, but it's also the processes and the way the society is organized. Now, what I claim is that let's look at the mid of the 20th century, the third quarter. You get the computers, and then you get a number of technologies associated. You may remember, you may have seen, most of you don't remember, but some of us do, and you may have seen pictures of these big computers filling up rooms. And then as time went on, you start seeing that those big computers start being squeezed in smaller computers, then in desktop computers, in laptops, in tablets, and things start getting connected, and you got the internet. That is an evolution of something that started in 1969, and we can talk of a third industrial revolution, because life changed. And actually, one interesting thing of that one is the power of multiplication by 2. It's referred to in technological terms by Moore's law, that essentially meant that the complexity of the electronics, more or less every 18 months, would double. And basically what happened is that you had, since the late 50s or early 60s, you had about 27 of those doublings, and 2 to the 27, if you do the computations, it's a very large number. It's a very large number. If you want to have an idea, just think that if you are trying to accelerate a car, and in the first minute of that acceleration, you kind of go about 1 mile or something like that, and you start doubling every minute the speed of your car. By the time you reach the 28th minute, you'll be traveling at the speed of reaching 11 million miles. I don't even know what 11 million miles is, but it's a very large number in terms of miles. So things did progress and did impact life. But time did not stop. And so my claim is now that after the third, of course, comes the fourth. And we are actually living the fourth revolution, okay, the fourth industrial revolution. And it's like what's called a perfect storm. A perfect storm, for those of you that saw a movie some 10 years ago, maybe, with George Clooney, where he's going on a fishing ship. Must be a Portuguese fishing ship, because it's off the coast of Massachusetts. And so he goes, and there is a perfect storm that unfortunately takes the boat down to the bottom of the ocean. What we are living is a perfect storm, a perfect confluence of technologies. And that's what I will try to expand in the next few minutes and few slides. And that perfect storm, if we want to put our finger on a particular year, if you want to say, oh, it happened on that, maybe the best example would be 2007, when Apple came up with the iPhone. Okay? So if we want to do, but of course it's not just that, but it's a confluence of technologies. And so what is it? you see the doubling of 2. I'll come back to what this curve means. But you see this, we engineers or people in the technologies call that an exponential growth, where things every year or every so often duplicate in complexity or in possibilities. Okay, so just to remind you of this fourth revolution and how it evolved, the bottom there is the technology, say, of the 50s and 60s. Basically, you had the mainframes, the big computers, and you had big software packages. Some people here, the old timers, will remember those cards, those computer cards, but that's even prehistory in terms of what we are talking about. But you have these mainframes and these computers, terminals connected, and so forth. And nobody actually remembers that. And that would be possibly thousands and possibly some millions of users. Then you move on to the second stage, in terms of this electronics and these computers and so forth. And you get into the interconnection to the PCs, to the 80s, and you reach out now to maybe hundreds of millions, because that's what the internet in the mid-80s, mid-90s was reaching out. So the internet is a phenomenon that, again, grew as an engineered-made system, grew very fast. And you see, in terms of application software, things that you know, you get the Microsoft Office, you get Oracle, you get SAP, and so forth, those types of big computer programs, but now run where users enter their information, and they have their companies have their transactions and regulate their businesses and so forth. And finally, we reach what I'm talking about today, where essentially, the key words here is, as I said, the iPhone or similar. So it's the mobility associated with the technology. The technology now fits in your pocket. You go around with it. And there are social networks. The people now is connected. Everything gets connected. So you get, in terms of companies, you get companies like Facebook, or you get access to the entertainment through Netflix and things of that sort. And instead of millions, you now talk about billions of users. We are interconnecting the whole population of the world, and each individual has not just a single cell phone. I carry two here because one is for Portugal, one is for the US, and now I also have my laptop. So everybody has a bunch of these things carrying around and being connected. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world. That's an amazing, if you think about, no matter where you are in the world, if you are going up the Kilimanjaro, you can call your friend in Porto and tell them about what beautiful things you are seeing up there. So anywhere, from any point in the world, you can reach any other point in the world. And this is exactly what was not there before. But that's not just that. The other thing is, and the rector said, okay, smart is going to be a word, and smart is a word, because everything now gets connected, and everything supposedly gets smarter. And so we'll be talking about smart homes, because you don't need anymore to check if if you have milk in the refrigerator, because the pack of milk or the bottle of milk, when it gets empty, sends a signal to somewhere. You don't even need to know that milk, you ran out of milk, so that someone in some warehouse somehow magically puts a bottle of milk in some distributor that gets to your door, and you get the milk. It doesn't get yet in your refrigerator, but gets at least at your door. And the power grid, the infrastructures, all get smart, okay? And I don't know about, I'm sure the power grid in Portugal is very reliable, but in the United States, the power grid is not reliable. And from time to time, there are little glitches, one electronic piece that gets burned, and that
takes over half of the electric power grid, and 50 million get 1 week without power, as it happened about 10 years ago in the northeast of the United States. That's going to be part of the past, because the grid itself is going to be smart. It's going to measure its state, and it's going to have electronics that will prevent those things of happening. And you'll have intelligent transportation systems. You have cars that are autonomous and that drive themselves. Healthcare, it will be everything dominated by these technologies. One particular aspect for me that I've been involved in the last couple of years is smart cities. Cities will also get smarter. Will get smarter because they will be instrumented. There will be cameras. There will be acoustic sensors. There will be atmospheric sensors, pollution sensors. There will be everything that will tell you about the state, the current state of the city. All the 911 calls, which in Portugal are the 115 or some type of call. All those calls are recorded. The police will receive from a computer or from a system, will receive hints of what to do, that they should go to a part of the city with maybe just a single car or maybe several cars, because if they don't take care of it right now, then 2 hours later it may be too late. So cities will be instrumented, everything will be interconnected, and one project, for example, that we are trying to develop ourselves is looking at cities, and I'm giving here the example of an urban sprawl like New York City, which is about 500 square miles, which is about 1,200 square kilometers. So 1,200 square kilometers, the square root of that is maybe 35 kilometers, so an area of 35 kilometers by 35 kilometers. And now you want to look at all this data that is coming in real time from all this city. For example, for cameras, like I have those cameras, and these there are about 1,500 to 1,000 cameras right now, and in the future there will be orders of magnitude more. And what you have is, in real time, you have these videos from all these cameras looking at the city, and you want to determine, is the city today at 9 o'clock, and today is Thursday, so 10 p.m., 10 o'clock at night, is this city as it usually is, or is something special going on? Okay, because if it's something, if it's today as it was a week ago on Thursdays at 10 p.m., who cares? Let's just keep living the way we are. But if there is something that looks different, then we want to know that beforehand so that we can take action. So that's the type and these cameras are start to be installed, and the challenge, of course, from an engineering point of view, is to be able to do it. We'll be able to monitor our infrastructures. So I know that there are several civil engineers here, so they will be glad that their bridges will be embedded with sensors, and those sensors will tell us when the bridge is at the verge of collapse. And for us that like to drive over bridges, that will be good, so that the bridge doesn't fall off when we are driving. And robotics will play a big role. Robotics will retransform manufacturing. So I have here on your left a Baxter, which is a robotic arms that is on a production line and is either connecting pieces from on a complex production line. On the right, I have the Kiva systems that Amazon bought, and those robots, those yellow things, they go everywhere in this mega warehouse that Amazon has, so that when you call and you buy that particular book or that particular item, it's no longer a human that walks across the warehouse to pick up and then bring it to cash register or to the place where you pack it. It's these robots that go and bring bring one of these blue things here, brings it to the individual that is packing, takes the piece that has been ordered, ships it, and it goes on. And it's not just that, it's also robots becoming companions, our own companions for our everyday life. Here is a robot that a colleague of mine that happens to be my wife, she's a professor at computer science at CMU. She develops these things, and this is delivering something to some office in the building. These things go around, and people get used to them, and it's that office that autonomously, nobody's joysticking the computer, and it delivers whatever it was supposed to deliver, and it goes on. But it's not just as companions, also for entertainment. And here is another thing that Manuel is involved with, and I asked her to give me these because they are much more impressive than the slides I could put together. And this is simply these creatures playing this game that humans call soccer or football in Portuguese. And the challenge is that in a couple of years, maybe by 2050, these machines will defeat Ronaldo and company. So that's what we have to get used to. So we talked about instrumenting reality, instrumenting cities, instrumenting how is it going to be, what are the numbers, and I told you what matters. The real, if there is anything I want you to get out of here today, is the power of multiplying by 2 every so often. And every so often is 1 year, 16 months, 18 months. And what you can see here is starting on the left, maybe around 1990 or 92, it's about 1 million. 1 million of these little things that can talk to each other. Okay, so not many, because it's 1 million over 7 billion humans in I don't know how many cities over the world and so forth. But you see that every so often this number keeps growing, and keeps growing in such a way that 1 million, about 10 years ago, will become about 50 billion. 50 billion. 50 billion, these are American billions. So I learned that Europeans call it the short billion, okay, the short billion. So it's 1,000 million, but still it's a large number. It's 50,000 millions, okay, of these little things that will be everywhere. So if you divide that by the population, it's about 10 per individual. So that's the power of 2. That's the growing that we are talking about. Okay, so these things that are called the Internet of Things, okay, the things now become all like your iPhone. They can talk to each other. They can they can tell you it's becoming too hot, and then the thermostat immediately starts the air conditioning. It's too cold, starts warming the room, whatever. This Internet of Things, these things, what they have in common is that they create, they measure, they create data, okay? And so that's the other thing. You have too many things from this Internet of Things, but you also have another thing, which is too much data. And to see how much data is that big data, okay, that big data is the big word. You see that we start on the right. It's little data. But as we move to the left, and I ran out of font size, okay? So you get that big data there, okay? But how big is big? Well, this company did a study about 2 years ago, and following Lincoln's dictum, said, let's create that future, okay? And so speculates that by 2020, this was about a year or two ago, so that would be like 2013, 2014, so it was 6 years. We are already in 2015, so we are talking about 5 years. That big data is going to be 40 ZBs. Okay, now, we all know what a ZB is, but I didn't know. So I went to my source of wisdom. My source of wisdom now is Wikipedia, okay? So I went to Wikipedia and say, what is a ZB? Well, a ZB turns out to be 40,000 EBs. Okay, I still don't know what a 40,000 EB is. So I went to 40 million PBs, 40 billion, the American billions, TBs, and finally I got to 40 trillion GBs. Now the GBs you know, because your cell phone has 8 GBs in the fast memory. GBs is the gigabyte, okay? So you start counting all the zeros. A gigabyte is 9 zeros. So you count all those zeros, and it's 40 with 21 zeros. Now, we all know what 40 with 21 zeros is. But just to tell you, to give you an idea, it's about 170 million LOCs. Now, you can see that even the language by which we measure things changed. Because now, what is an LOC? We know what a kilogram is. We know what a kilometer is. What is an LOC? Well, it turns out that LOC is when you don't know how to measure, you come up with a new measure. And it's called the Library of Congress. So, by 2020, there will be created, the humans like you, me, and those 50 billion things will create about 170 million United States Libraries of Congress per year. Okay. Now, the United States Library of Congress rivals with the British Library. So if you don't know the Library of Congress and you heard of the British Library is also big. Okay. So 170 million. Now, to give you an idea also of what this is in the mid-80s, when fiber optic was being deployed, people also wanted to say, oh, fiber is very fast. There is a lot of information that goes to the fiber. And so they came up with a measure. And the measure at that time, in 1985, in the mid-80s, so about 30 years ago, the measure at that time of complexity, of large, of big, was the Bible. The Bible, which is a big book, okay, it has lots of words, and I'm sure all of you have read it. The Bible was the level of complexity 30 years ago. Today, the level of complexity is a full library with all the videos, with all the maps, with all the images, with all the data that is stored. And I remind you that the Library of Congress there, by law, by the American law, every single book that enters the United States has to be deposited in the Library but many other things. So that's how big is. It's so big that the Harvard Business Review, that is a magazine that people like to read, said, and I don't remember exactly when, but maybe 2 years ago, that there was a sexiest job. So sexiest that I changed my job description. Now I'm also a data scientist, okay? Because that's, according to the Harvard Review, it's the sexiest job, okay? And make this, I'm joking, but all my students now, when they look for a job, they say, I'm a data scientist. Okay, so here is another way of showing. So you have all these circles, okay? And where will all this data reside? Well, we talked about mainframes, we talked about cell phones, we talked about all that. Well, that big circle of lighter color means computers that exist somewhere, and that's called the cloud. Okay, Microsoft has a cloud, Google has a cloud, Amazon has a cloud. And all the All the rest, which is much bigger, will reside somewhere or will simply be lost. Nobody will look at that data. And our challenge is actually trying to make sense of all that data. Okay, I want to finish with two things. One is the United States National Academy of Engineering in 2014, last year, came up with 14 grand challenges. And the grand challenges, I looked at them and I organized in 3 or 4 categories. I'm not listing all of them. 3 have to do with health, okay, and things related to the human body, and they are listed there. Reverse engineer the brain as a complicated system, engineer better medicines, advanced health informatics. These are challenges. Then 5 of them have to do with energy. Okay, we have to be self-sufficient in energy, we have to be sustainable, we have to be careful. And a big challenge, the last one there, the clean water. Okay, these are all challenges. Okay, and of course, the 2 top ones have to do with security. We know that today security is a big issue. And others, urban infrastructure, learning, scientific discovery. And there are others that I didn't mention here. The other thing I want to tell you is that I've, in the last couple of years, the last few years, I've been sitting on a privileged point of view, looking at Portugal and collaborating with many here. And what I think is that there are many young entrepreneurs. And so there is hope. There is hope that Portugal itself is not going to see all this going around. And I just list here a few of the companies that these are called startups. So people that started, for example, Fidzai is a company out of Coimbra. And it's a 2 or 3 year company, looks at the power grid and looks at the events. So I told you about those blackouts, millions of people without power. They exactly detect that before the event happens. And they have customers all over the world, started 2 or 3 years. And the other one I want to call attention is Venium. Venium is a company here from Porto, from the FEUP, a startup from FEUP, João Barros, and it's extremely successful, is going to connect your cars. Your cars are going to be the sensors of tomorrow, and as they drive around Porto and tell you, and will help the city of Porto to stay interconnected and connected. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank very much also for helping me with managing the time. It was a perfect timing, and was, of course, a very, very nice view of what we are going to face in next years. Next speaker is Andrea Ricci. He is Vice President of the ISIS, the Institute of Studies of Integrated Systems in Rome. He came from Italy. Integration, of course, is also going to be one of the words of the future. Andrea Ricci is an engineer. He's also an engineer from École Centrale, and he's a specialist in sustainability policy analysis and impact assessment in the areas of building, energy, and transportation. He has been very much involved in quite a large portfolio of European programs in different framework programs. So he's a researcher from a long time ago. But more than that, and perhaps quite important for this discussion of tonight, he has been author of a EUA report from DG Research for assessing social and environmental impacts of European research, and other reports on the overall socio-economic dimension of the 5th framework program. But more than that, Andrea Ricci was the rapporteur of a very recent study from the European of the EC, European Union Working Group on Global Europe 2030-2015, and so I think he will be the right person to let us know what will be the impacts of the future. So thank you very much.
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for your nice words of introduction, Antonio. Yes, my talk is significant. I mean, I'm an engineer indeed, but not a hardcore technologist as the other speaker, so you'll hear some kind of a different voice here. What I'd like to share with you are some views about what we do with technologies and how we assess them, how we value them, and to what extent the future success, the future fate of technologies that are now emerging is driven by technology itself or by the socioeconomic impacts that it entails. So my first question would be, how can we actually envisage to measure the possible success of a given technology? Well, currently, I would say that very roughly, the basic way in which we assess the success of technology is the market. So success of a technology is pretty much correlated to its diffusion, to the rate of market uptake. Of course, there are a number of constraints that surround this, and the public authority, the states, are very often responsible for that, setting requirements on quality, on safety, on efficacy. But still, it's the suppliers of technology which are responsible, of course, for ensuring compliance with that, according to a certain number of procedures. But what is valued are the intrinsic properties of the technologies. And what happens next? So that when the technologies reach the user, well, the users, of course, are expected to make responsible use of those technologies. Now, how does that translate in terms of our capability of evaluating costs and benefits, risks and benefits of a technology? Well, as far as concerns risks, I think we're pretty well endowed with this a set of rules and procedures in terms of safety, in terms of misuse of specific technologies, and we ascertain them, and we are pretty well equipped in terms of how to value them. The problem comes when one wants to assess the potential benefits of a technology which is still to come. And the current way of doing this falls significantly short of providing a fully fledged assessment, in the sense that it mainly looks at what we know how to evaluate, which is basically the macroeconomic impacts of technological innovation and of its diffusion in terms of GDP, in terms of creation of jobs. And this follows a very simple reasonment, that is that if technological progress is by and large correlated with the research and the research effort, with the RTD effort, then this is a result of a recent modeling exercise that shows clearly that on the vertical axis you have the percentage increase in spending in research and technology development, and you can see that most other variables, macroeconomic variables, so GDP, consumption, employment, grow pretty well with the increase in technological investment. This is what I call the macroeconomic effect, which of course is important, but fails to take into account the full range of individual and collective societal impacts that the future technology may yield. And why is that? Well, basically, like I'm saying, this results from the fact that there is no baseline, no method, no normative baseline to assess societal benefits. That's one point, that's one difficulty. The other difficulty is the fact that societal needs, values, and preferences tend to be very dynamic and to change in a very fast manner. I'll give you an example. You know, I come from Rome, so you won't be surprised from this example. This is a picture from the election of the Pope in 2005, not the current Pope, the previous one. This is St. Peter's Square, the day of the evening of the election. A few years later, with a new Pope, this is what it looked like. not many years after. So, okay, so whether good or bad, I'm not saying. If the use of technology that is being made for this particular circumstances is to be praised or not, I'm not judging it, but I'm just saying that it's fast, it goes fast. So in fact, the big issue that we have here, bearing in mind that what we're looking at is a use of technology and a development choice, a priority setting of technology, and then a context that allows to use the technology to go towards a better life. Our big issue is how to make a systematic assessment of the ethical dimensions of technologies. This was mentioned also in the introductory words by our hosts. And more generally, how to be able to successfully address all the wide range of societal problems and needs, equity and inequalities, privacy, freedom, self-fulfillment, and more generally, well-being. We are not well equipped today, analytically speaking, in terms of tools, methods, procedure, to assess in advance this kind of impacts. Let me take an example from the transport sector. In the transport sector, there are a certain number of technologies which somehow we already know that they will play an important role in the next 10, 20, 30 years. They call technological progress, which is already somehow in the cards. To mention a few, hydrogen, and particularly for fuel cells, but also second or third generation biofuels, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, the most critical uncertainties in this area do not relate specifically to the nature of the technologies. Of course, we need to improve the technology to make them operational, etc. But the main uncertainties are related to the mix, the basket of such technologies and the picture that will emerge of this. How much electric, how much fast trains, etc. Which clearly depends, of course, on the performance of the technology, but depend a lot also on policy choices and on societal choices, on land use choices like urban sprawl and the tools to address it. Now, the real questions to which we don't know exactly how to answer are questions that are related to behaviors, to lifestyle, to choices, to preferences. So the real drivers of the extent to which certain technologies will actually penetrate the market beyond the quality of the technology itself. I'm not underplaying it, but I'm saying that it's not enough to be able to foresee what will happen. There are a certain number of basic questions, like the ones that I'm asking here. Speed. Is the so-called speed paradigm going to be sustained, and is it sustainable, in fact? You know, there is also a very famous conjecture in transport economists which says that no matter how fast the vehicles go, no matter how the planet is shrinking due to progress in transport technology, individuals and families tend to devote the same amount of time to travel. This is a conjecture which holds and has held for many years. Will it hold in the future? And what if the social paradigm, the social needs, the social preference change, and this conjecture fails to be sustained? And of course, there are questions which are more directly related to the performance of technology, with, however, here again, a dimension of social choice and social preference, which is not to be underplayed. For instance, the role of all virtual or augmented or whatever else reality. Does it only depend on the performance of technology, or does it depend on what people want to do with it and whether they will accept of being a virtual tourists and not a real tourists, for instance? A different set of values. So the key message here is that, again, the real issue is understanding how the interrelation between the desired features of a future system, in this case in transport, but this is applicable to other sectors as well, how these interrelate with the dynamics of society, with its norms and values, etc., its culture. Now, not surprisingly, this translates into a number of recent foresight exercises which are structured around not so much the technological variables, but socioeconomic variables. This is one of those which I like particularly, where the scenarios that this that this diagram will show are based on the combination of two main axes. One is speed, once again, so the axis that goes from top left to the bottom right. Do it fast versus do it slow. We're not talking only about moving fast or moving slow. We're talking about the characterization of society, consuming fast, producing fast, thinking fast maybe, relating fast to others. On the other axis, you have a dimension which is again typical of characterization of a socioeconomic context, is what I would call cohesiveness and solidarity versus individualism in a way. So are we going towards a world where we value increasingly the fact of doing things together as a cooperative, or are we sticking to the currently prevailing, I would say, trend where individualism tends to be prevailing? So building, I won't go into the details of that, it's just to give you an example of how the same technological dynamics may yield completely different worlds depending on the assumptions on values and on socio-economic paradigms that are behind them. In this case, we have a basket of fruits, a pear, apple. This is a potato on the bottom. It's not easily recognizable, but it's a potato. It looks more like a nut, but it's a potato. And an orange on the new welfare. And of course, there's a very abundant narrative behind all these things, but basically what this diagram says is that currently we are in the pear world, growth without limits. We're trying desperately to move out of it, and we're trying to go towards the green shift, towards the apple, which is the so-called green growth. And the big question is that good enough? Of course, nobody wants to go down there. But there might be a different world, which in this case, with a kind of visionary approach, is called the new welfare, which maybe can go beyond the green growth. Let me give you a couple of examples. Of course, in the growth without limits, there is a lot of things happening in the technological realm. This is not a regressive scenario. It is a scenario where we go fast, and we go fast even in terms of technological progress, so new tech wave, etc. Maybe characterized more by techno fixes than by anticipating the real problems of the future, but there's lots of things happening in technological terms. Same goes with the energy efficiency, which certainly is a major strategic drive of all policies. However, in this kind of system where hyper-consumerism is still the name of the game, it is very likely, and this is what we're witnessing now, that this technological progress may be easily offset by what is usually called the rebound effect. So the lifestyles, the more you have, the more you eat, basically. And if we keep putting things on the table, we'll keep increasing our diet. And this scenario here is clearly characterized by what I call the totemic measure of GDP. That's the only thing. The paradigm is driven by the need or the aspiration to grow. The Apple scenario is still a growth scenario, with again lots of things happening in terms of technological progress, with however a different flavor, because we are aware of the limits of the planet, and therefore we hope that our policymakers will steer the use of the same technologies or similar technologies towards a different model. And we can summarize this by saying that GDP is still there and is still an important driver, but on top of this, we are aware of environmental issue, of the need to mitigate climate change and so on. Welfare is really a change in paradigm. It's a change in paradigm in the sense that some of the keywords have already been mentioned, of course, the issue of open knowledge and open access, and the shift from a society based on tangibles towards intangibles, from ownership to share, and so on, is what really characterizes this new storyline. But here again, what I'd like to underline is that it's not so much the nature of the technologies or their performances that changes, it's the way in which these technologies are used within a socioeconomic model which has different values and different aspirations. Of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch, so one has to be ready for some trade-offs. Again, I won't enter into details, but for instance, you can see that in this case, the green and the orange scenario in terms of technology behave more or less in the same way, but their performance in terms of environmental issues is significantly different. And of course, the trade-off and the no free lunch is translated in terms of GDP, because one must be prepared in that case of seeing a lesser growth or even a stable economy model. So we should be ready for trade-off. There are other indicators that are very seldom considered and taken into account when assessing whether at the micro level or at the macro level technology policies. And for instance, this is one issue on which we start thinking, but again, we need more measurement tools, the disparity, inequalities, wealth disparities. It's very seldom that you see in an ex-ante assessment of a technology policy their effect in terms of wealth disparities. We've modeled here, for instance, the potential effects of the two scenarios, apple and orange, and you can see that there is a significant difference there. And the same goes, for instance, for self-accomplishment. Have you ever seen a document from the World Bank or from the Monetary Fund that talks about evaluating a policy according to the results in terms of the self-accomplishment of citizens? Well, if you have, please tell me. And you can see again that there is a high sensitivity of specific variables. I don't enter into the way this is calculated, you'll have to trust me. But there is clearly a significant divergence. So again, trade-offs, are they worthwhile and are we ready to go this way? Now, where do we go from here? If you look at the current policy package of the European Union, for instance, because this is where we live, which is based primarily on the so-called EU 2020 strategy. We've called this a perseverance scenario. Perseverance is a virtue. Perseverance is good. I'm not saying this is bad. The question is it good enough, once again? We can contend that in the long term it will not be enough. And there are, I think, good reasons for this. Basically because we are objectively witnessing a global demographic aging. Look at the picture on the right side of the slide. The green line in the middle is Europe. Declining investment rate and significantly uncertain prospects of innovation and policy reform. So I think that the perseverance scenario, which, as I said, is not the bad scenario, but is a scenario which can be questioned in terms of being enough in the long term. So we tend to consider that we need to go beyond that. We need to go beyond and we need to exploit seeds of change that are already there, but which policies should be responsible for valorizing, for exploiting at the maximum, and which is not currently included in policy documents that are the mainstream ones. So if we want to go towards something which goes beyond perseverance, like I said, and I'm insisting here, these are not alternative scenarios. So the metamorphosis scenarios incorporates already the good features of the perseverance, but tries to go beyond. And if we try to translate this, for instance, in terms of sectoral behavior, you can see that what we're saying here, for instance, is that for the innovation dynamics, of course, we need the rising automation and smart networked economy, which is the current buzzword and the current mantra of industrial innovation and innovation tout court. But we need to pay more attention to social innovation, to a collaborative economy, to eco-industries and intangibles. And this is not yet sufficiently spelled out in the current policy packages. Again, a similar thing, we've heard about Internet of Things, and of course, again, I'm not saying that we can do without. I'm saying that we should go possibly a little bit beyond that, and the platforms that we've heard of should be increasingly human-centered rather than technology-driven if we want to go beyond the current model of market-based evaluation of technologies. Now, a few words about something which is also becoming a buzzword, especially in the European Commission, but I think worldwide, which is the so-called key enabling technologies. Why is it important to discuss these key enabling technologies? Because while innovation in sectors like transport or energy, if we're talking, for instance, about the future of batteries, okay, we all know that we need to have batteries that recharge faster, that are cheaper, that are lighter, and we know exactly what we want to do with those. There is limited uncertainty for what concerns the actual use that we would like to make of a would-be better battery. And I could multiply the examples in this. When we're talking about the so-called key enabling technologies, these are multi-purpose technology, and the multi is very broad and applies also to a number of purposes that we cannot think about today. So in terms of assessment of the future impact or the future value of a technology, the problem which is already difficult for a generic technology is even more difficult for key enabling technologies, because there is this huge uncertainty about what exactly we're going to do with those. The interesting thing is that, okay, this is the list, the typical list of the 6 basic key KETs, as they are now called, as recognized by the European Commission. The interesting thing is that if you look at, this is taken from the ranking of top technologies for the future made by the World Economic Forum. The two editions, the one in 2014 and then the one of this year. And you can see an interesting list of things. Some we know, some we wonder, some we would like to learn. But the interesting thing is that most of them relate to key emerging technology, key enabling technologies. All the yellow ones are in fact key enabling technologies, so multi-purpose horizontal technologies with, as I said, a level of uncertainty attached for what concerns their use and misuse, their impacts and their benefits, which is inherently higher. So we have a big issue there. Yeah, I think I'm going to skip that because we've heard a lot about ICT from our previous speaker. What I have tried to do here is simply to translate the perseverance and metamorphosis concept in the specific area of ICT, because clearly it is an area which is on top of all our agendas, but I'm sure you've heard that already. Now let me finish with a few hopeful and optimistic comments about what is happening in terms of policy. And I would like to mention another, I would say, buzzword, if you wish, but it's more than that. It's a great innovation in terms of research and technological development policy, which is called RRI, that is Responsible Research and Innovation, where clearly the essence of the message is in the term responsible. Now, what does that mean? This is a definition which I adapted from the European Commission, which tells it about clearly inclusive approach to research and innovation to ensure that societal actors work together, etc. But above all, it aims to better align both the process and outcomes of research and innovation with values, needs, and expectations of society. And how to do that? There are 6 pillars, and of course we could elaborate much more in detail of what is behind each of these titles, but I think it's important to understand that the keywords here are, again, involvement at various levels, active, interactive, passive, early, late, with society. So public engagement, gender equality, education in science, of course, attention to ethics, open access, again, better communication, interaction, and not surprisingly, we need a system of governance that ensures that all this is working as it should. I'd like to finish with this. I think this summarizes pretty well, I think, the challenge of actually developing and implementing and enforcing a policy that will foster more responsible research and innovation. This is the typical scale of so-called technological readiness which is something which was invented, as many of these things, by the military, by NASA and the space guys, but which is now a fairly mainstream way of ranking, positioning a given technology along its life cycle. So it starts at the bottom with the very basic research. I'm not sure you can read, because can you read this? I hope you can. Anyway, it starts at the very bottom with the technological readiness level 1, which are basic principles, and it proceeds toward the technological concept, proof of concept, first test, second test, prototype, integrated pilot system demonstrated, the system becomes commercial, and then ultimately it's ready for full-scale deployment. This is a classical way of summarizing the various steps of development of a technology. Now, my contention is that today the concern about responsible research and innovation in the most performant cases starts somewhere between level 6 and 7. So we start worrying and doing something about checking what society thinks about technology, if it actually fits their needs, their purposes, if it's aligned with their values. We start worrying about this, or at least checking where we are, pretty much in the high part of that scale. So if I had to summarize the challenge of going towards a world that takes better account of dynamic of values, of preferences, needs, etc., I would say that what we need to do is this, basically. So we need to anticipate, that's why I'm saying time is of the essence, anticipate our concerns about responsibility of developing technologies and working at it together with the users, with society, at the very beginning of the stage. It's not easy. It's a big challenge. It costs money. It means a change of mindsets, of culture. But that's the only way if we want to ensure that the famous gap that we have in our capability of assessing the benefits and not only the risks of a technology is progressively filled. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea, for this very nice view of the implications of technology, of what future will bring to us, and also thank you for the perfect timing. As Álvaro Vasconcelos introduced in the beginning, this series of conferences these conferences are followed by a group of very bright young academicians from universities of the northern region of Portugal and central region of Portugal. And as far as I know, two of them, of course, the most brightest scientists that we have here tonight, are scheduled for putting some questions and so, or to make some comments. So I'm expecting for the comments of Bernardo Madalovo and Marcela Canavarro, please.
Bernardo Almadalobo from University of Porto and Inesctec. Thank you for the nice words, by far inflated. I'd like to focus on the title of this series, The Futures of Portugal. And we have seen trends, game changers that are worldwide, but I'd like to focus on the role of Portugal, especially concerned about manufacturing. One of the things that we have seen are new manufacturing technologies going on, new automation processes. We have seen the history of the several revolution areas. We went from a kind of linear development of the technology, so each technology being evolved by itself, to, as was referred, the perfect storm. So we have now actually a convergence of different technologies going on. We have seen nano, ICT, new materials, additive manufacturing. But essentially all of these, together with a more demanding customer that has been empowered. We have been witnessing something going from mass production to mass customization. So people now are really willing to have customized objects. These will somehow, now people are, especially because of additive manufacturing and 3D printing, companies are evolving. This is somehow is democratizing manufacturing, so we don't need any more high capital investments. In the future, we'll be able to produce probably at our places our own shoes. It seems that in 2030, we'll be able to prepare our own meals in a kind of food printer, so we won't need a bimby anymore. We're going to produce our own organs. The things that Portugal is known to be quite good in terms of low volume, high mix, agile, and flexibility. What will be the role? Because as we will be able to produce our products at the near shore, the supply chains will be completely different. We're referring to the movement of raw materials. It will be completely different. All the transportation of goods will be different. So what will be the role of the Portuguese manufacturing community? How is this a risk, or do you have an opportunity, as actually other countries will also be able to produce in this kind of low series and high mix?
Okay, thank you very much. We'll have the second comment from Marcelo Canavarro, and after that I will ask you to try to answer them jointly. Please.
Hi, good evening to the speakers and the audience here. Well, after the 70s, the ICT industry has been seen as the new gold egg and has been seen since then as the main economical growth driver. After that, we saw the massive influence of the internet and digital devices on all societal relations. The internet can be seen now as the huge technological system that drives the economy, just like the electricity system was seen in the past. And simultaneously, we have seen a commoditization of the internet. The system was born as an open system with non-hierarchical relations and non-commercial in the beginning. And a number of specialists has been pointing out that the internet has been more and more similar to a paid TV system. And this is pretty much related to the net neutrality issue that has been discussed pretty much like mainly in the US, in the European Union, and Brazil. At the political side, we've been seeing a huge imbalance of what the states can access about their citizens and what citizens can access about their states' activities. And for instance, we've been seeing a number of human rights advocates that have been arrested for what the state thought they would do in the near future based on what they searched about them on their interactions online. And it's something that Edward Snowden changed, like it's a tipping point on how we saw the state surveillance before Snowden and after Snowden. It's something really important we have to think about. And hacktivism has been the very single strategy that citizens have to face to this imbalance with their own governments. It's like a real cat and rat game. Now, and most of the times, hackers' activities are still considered illegal, although this is the only way citizens have to face this. So my question is, isn't this current idea of the Internet of Things, big data, and other related issues quite naive about the advantages they bring to the society in a whole way to think? Isn't it much more related to a trend of increased lack of privacy and limitation of human rights, such as freedom of expression, than related to a real citizen empowerment? How do you think we can balance these two sides of the same process?
Okay, thank you very much for these very interesting comments, and I will ask our main speakers to comment. Who would like to go first? Okay, so Andrea, please.
Yes, on the first question, the future role of manufacturing communities. To summarize, your comment was more elaborated than that, but that's what I picked in terms of keywords. Two issues. The first one, I think, there's the territorial dimension. There is certain, if we go a certain direction, that is with 3D printing, etc., this inevitably means the resurgence or the emergence of the local dimension of production. To some extent, we're already witnessing this in some specific areas. You may call it a fashion, but maybe it's not a fashion with 0 kilometers food and things like that. I think that there will be a trend towards this localization of production, which, however, once again, has its risks in terms of ensuring the same variety of supply, ensuring the same level of satisfaction of the needs. So I don't know if it's the key, but certainly one of the key issues from a policy point of view is to explore, once again, the social impacts of this in order to be convincing when issuing policies that take advantage of these new technologies and somehow accompany them in a way that can adjust the production system and the manufacturing patterns and profiles to these trends. On the second issue, again, I think I fully share your concerns. I mean, I think in my presentation I tried also to mention them systematically, that the success, let's take Internet of Things or big data or whatever, the ultimate success of this fantastic innovation, this fantastic technological progress, will have to be checked against its acceptability, to put it in a very simple way. And acceptability is not something that can be done as lip service, as it is often done. That is trying to, there's a very nice diagram which shows the various level of the participation from the almost, let's say, yes, lip service, which is completely top-down, where it's not participation, it's just sending a message down and trying to be convincing about it, all the way up to involving people in determining the objectives from the beginning. I think we're pretty much down on the scale at this time. We do not yet have a pervasive governance culture that allows for a true engagement of users, of citizens, of consumers in the basic choices. Users are engaged in how to use the technology once the technology is there, and more often than not, some of the problems, it's already too late to solve them. So we can build wonderful systems of legal protections that are good on the paper, etc., but I don't think this is the solution. I think the solution is to check as soon as possible the implications of specific applications. It cannot be done generally, because if you put it on philosophical terms, it becomes unmanageable in a dialogue with the society at large. It has to be done in a very concrete way, and again, it costs a lot of money to do that from the governance point of view, but that's the only way.
Very interesting questions. So what is the role for the Portuguese manufacturing industry? But that's, of course, for others to answer. But since I have the mic here, I'll speculate. And the role of the Portuguese manufacturing industry is the role of any other industry in the world, okay? Because when we are at the start of a game changer, the word used, of a fourth industrial revolution, it's like everybody is on the same level, okay? Everybody's at the same level. And Portuguese are not less than the others. And so I would turn the question around and say, we have our greatest opportunity right now. It's a great opportunity for us. And one thing is for sure, is that mass production, as you well said, with 3D printing and with all these great technologies, mass production is out of the picture. And the Chinese know it. And the Chinese know it. And the US also knows it because it's bringing back the factories to the US. And so Portugal doesn't have the volume for mass production anyway. So we have to find the niches where we can make the difference. And to do that, what we need is smart people. So go out and start educating the masses, okay? So that's my point. I'm, of course, an educator. I live off education, so I have to say education is the key. But that's what we need, is people with bright ideas, the young people. I gave you an example of 10 companies. I'm fascinated by the Portuguese invention. I visited the University of Porto Innovation Center, or whatever you guys call it, about a year ago. And I heard, I don't know, 10 people, 20 people telling us about their ideas. They were all fascinating ideas. So what we need is to create conditions for those Portuguese inventors to be able to succeed. So what's the role of the Portuguese manufacturing industry? It's an open book. And let's all hope that they find their way as everybody else is trying to figure that out. Now, on the second question. The second question is an interesting question. And of course, it's a political scientist, I think, speaking. And so the only thing I can say is the following. We cannot stop human invention, okay? Humans, since the very beginning, so Gutenberg came up with something that at the time he came, the powers that be didn't like it, okay? But he came up with it, and education grew exponentially immediately after, okay? So the big data, the IoT, all those things are there. And now there is a big polemic about AI, artificial intelligence, okay? And there are some that say we should immediately regulate artificial intelligence. Don't let the inventors or the people that work on those things, the robots are going to take are going to take over. Humans will be controlled by robots. What I'm telling you is the following. Technology, you can't stop it. The human invention, what is in our brain, that's our freedom, our liberty. We'll continue doing it. Now, it's up to the same humans to use it in a way that can go bad or that can go well. So I turn the question back to you. You are the political scientist. So you find a way so that technology is used for the best of all of us. But if you don't, then you'll have to live with the consequences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't resist to make also a small comment. And of course, the word reindustrialization, back to industry, is a word that is currently used by our politicians in Europe and North America. And of course, the so-called Western societies are really struggling for having back the industry that went to East. Of course, we will have a new industry and we need a new industry. But this industry is not going to be any more the industry that went out of here. This industry will be different, by sure. And so there is already someone that are using the word, not new words, but the word renaissance, that will have a kind of a renaissance of industry that is going to be completely different. We know that this industry is going to be connected. We know that it's going to be green, or should be green. We know that it's to be more knowledge-based. But of course, it will develop in quite different ways in different areas. One thing, and is my way to link to the question of Marcela, this industry, of course, will give a higher centrality to man, to the people in the industry will be less, but they will be really more important and more effective. And because this increasing importance of technology will give a higher importance to the people that is leading with it. And so I support very much the statement of José Fonseca de Moura. We need to have real people very, very well educated to be able to handle these challenges, both in industry and the other parts of society. I think we come to the last part of this session, and the last part is the open discussion with the public. So we will be pleased to take your questions. I already see one over there, and another over there. Okay, so please, okay, we'll take three. We will start by Ana Sofia Gonçalves. Ana Sofia Gonçalves Carvalho, and after that we can go with Miguel, and we have two down. Okay, we'll take, I think, you went groups of 3, 4, 3? 2 by 2, okay. We'll take these two, and after that, I think these are we are coming from top to down, and we are, okay, please.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank both the excellent conference, and after listening both, and of course, my name is Ana Sofia Carvalho, and I'm from the Institute of Bioethics of the Portuguese Catholic University. After listening both, I think that we must think deeply about the threats to human dignity, and we must recall again the Aristotelic prudence to this debate, and I think probably prudence will be the key for all of these, together with education, of course. I have some questions, basically, mostly in the 4 ethical issues most prominent in this type of discussion, and of course you cannot answer all my questions, and you answer what questions you think are probably more important. And the first ethical issue is of course privacy, and the main question is what information about oneself must a person reveal to the others, under what conditions and with what safeguards. Then the second ethical issue is the currency. Always responsible for the authenticity and fidelity of the data, of that big data. Property, who owns the information, who owns the channel, especially the airways through which the information is transmitted, and last but not the least, accessibility. What information does a person or organization have the right or the privilege to obtain, under what conditions, and with what safeguards? Thank you very much.
No, you can't.
Thank you so much. Miguel Oliveira from 3B's Research Group, University of Minho. I'd like to congratulate the speakers for the nice talks. My concern as a scientist is not on the need to have smarter people. I think we have the smarter people, but in Portugal, and we have good scientists. My major concern is about the human brain limitation to process all this data that is being gathered by these smart devices in our cities, in our hospitals, and so on. So human brain cannot process all 1 ZB of information, first. And what Portugal should do to extract a commercial value for the country from this information, how this information should be accessed not only by the citizen that is generating all this information, but also by scientists, which can help us formulate new research questions. And in terms of economic benefit for the society, how this information will be ruled, accessed by scientists and society, and should be this information managed by the government or by the privates? Can you comment on this?
So thank you for the questions. So Ana Sofia asked very interesting questions, of course. Again, I have the privilege of holding the mic, so I'll attempt to address some ethical issues, privacy. So who uses Google Maps? Who uses Waze? Who has an account with Google or with Yahoo or whatever? And so each time we use one of these things, we give away a little of our privacy. Who uses credit cards? Each time we use our credit card, we are giving away our privacy. So these are extremely difficult questions. And I don't think anyone knows the answer. So there is a professor, a very well-known professor, and he develops codes, and he's someone very engaged. And so someone that supposedly would develop encryption to protect the privacy. And he simply says, I gave up on my privacy. Okay, so I don't think we should. And but I don't know how to answer your question. Who is responsible for big data? That's another interesting question. So let's look at Big Brother. Okay, Big Brother, and we all know that 2 years ago Snowden took away from Hawaii, where he was working for some contractor that gave him access to the depth of the NSA and the National Security Agency of the US and all that, brought all that data, okay? Up to then, nobody knew that the Verizon, which is the former Portuguese telecom, now it has some other name, but the Verizon is the Portuguese telecom of the United States, and the AT&T, nobody knew that they were giving access to all the phone calls that we make to some big brother. So, who is responsible for big data? I think we all are. And again, we need to make sure that we keep attempting to put in place safeguards. On the other hand, we know that the world is a dangerous place. Okay, and so if we protect all our data, who knows what happens tomorrow when we fly on an airplane or we enter a train or whatever, okay? So these are the issues that the fourth revolution brings to the fore. So all the issues you raise, privacy, counterpoint safety, okay? How do we play with those things? Very difficult questions. Who owns the data? Who owns the channel? The data, I'll tell you. Google owns the data, okay? And whoever like. So the data is actually the most valuable commodity tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow the business is going to be owning the data. And so who owns the data? It's not me, even my private data. It's going to be the companies that own the data are going to be the Facebooks of tomorrow. Okay, I know I'm not answering your questions, but I'm raising different questions. Now, Miguel asks about the human brain. The human brain is a small computer. It has only 10 to the 9 neurons, I think. And, oh no, 10 to the 11 neurons and 10 to the 14 or 15 connections among those neurons, okay? So, that's quite complicated. And before we actually build a computer, although Kurt Weill says that by 2030 or 40 we'll have built a computer that is as complex as the human brain, I doubt, okay? And one of the grand challenges that I pointed to you was exactly reverse engineer the brain. So I'll tell you something about the brain. I wrote recently a proposal about the brain that Luis was asking me. Those 10 to the 10 or 10 to the 11 neurons, we can only access about 10,000 of them. So we don't really know how the brain functions. And so that's the big challenge of reversing it, okay? It's very complicated, but on the other hand, you say the human brain cannot process the data, but who cares? Why do we want to process the data? Look at the cameras, looking at all the intersections in New York City. Do you want to know which car crossed the street? We don't. We only want to know that no car is crossing the street. So what we want is not the massive amounts of data. What we want is when something is different out of the ordinary. And for that, you don't need you need to process the data, but your brain doesn't need to know it, okay? The only thing we need to know is the higher levels. From the data you extract information, from the information you extract knowledge, from knowledge you extract wisdom. Wisdom is what you want to know. Wisdom is knowing that today in Porto, Avenida da Circunvalação, there are no cars. Why? That's what you want to know. If I tell you tomorrow at 6:15 when I'm going to the airport, the average of cars on the highway is going to be 1 per minute, or that's like yesterday. You don't need to know that. But if there are no cars on the highway, or if there are lots of cars and the traffic jam, then you want to know that. So we, human brain, don't need to process all that data. What you need is the higher levels of what you can extract from the data. And I'll stop here and let Andrea to address the other issues.
Wow, difficult to add much to that. Just a couple of comments from my side. I think I share most of what you said. On the last comments on who needs what, I mean, this is a really crucial question, and one that we haven't even started to address. I personally have the feeling that people have a tendency, because they've been somehow educated in this direction, to do things just because they are feasible. just because they are doable. So they are doable, so let's do them. And this is a cultural bias which clearly reflects immediately on the kind of comments that you were saying, because who needs to know this and that? Well, it's there. So why not use it? I think this is a bias which is extremely dangerous. Now, in terms of the trade-off between privacy and the rest, I think clearly needs be a set of rules. And this set of rules must, at the minimum, guarantee that there is an opt-out possibility on behalf of the players. I think this is a basic freedom that all people should be granted. Now, whether the freedom to opt out is backed by sufficient evidence that justifies that who wants to opt out has his or her mind made up in a rational way, that's a different story. And this is what the responsibility of both researchers, developers, and the state should be, to provide the sufficient evidence for people to make a rational decision when they decide to opt in or opt out, to give up a bit of their privacy because they believe that they will draw a benefit from this. Another comment, I think there's a lot of talk about the transition between a society based on the value of ownership towards a society which is based on the value of sharing things. The evaluation of the commons, etc. Now, here again, and the question was, what is the economic benefit? Well, the economic benefit has to be demonstrated. If it's not demonstrated, then we have an answer that it's not worthwhile. But the theory of cooperation, which is an old age theory, which shows that in many circumstances, putting resources in common, to put it bluntly, benefits everybody, or benefits at least a majority of the players, is something which should be applied and has not yet been applied to the sharing of data. It is more difficult to both to devise a comprehensive theory and benefit measurement for intangibles than it is for a washing machine in a condominium or for a car in a car sharing system. But that's a way to go. Until and unless we are able to demonstrate the economic benefits, both individual and collective, of the sharing option, the question remains open. So let's try it. I don't know what the answer is. And maybe it's not always the same answer. In some cases, it is an answer that will encourage people to cooperate. In other cases, it might be an answer that discourages them from cooperating, depending on how much they value their privacy, for instance. Yes, no, the other thing, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't have it here, but I received a mail from a friend recently who gave a series of examples of, I think one was Alibaba, the biggest retail store in the world, no inventory. The other was, I think, Facebook, the largest communication device in the world, no original contents. So this decoupling from the economic activity and the value of the asset that the economic activity is based on is something which, I mean, we should try to understand this better. I don't think we have a clear view of what this means. If it's only a capitalistic way of going from tangibles to intangibles, or if there is a real shift in values and in the patterns of production, consumption, etc. I think there's a lot to be said about this, and we haven't yet explored this enough.
Thank you very much. I think we have at least two candidates here on the first row, and okay, but let's go here to the first row. We have Sérgio Ribeiro and José Manuel Mendonça. Here, in the front. Aqui na frente, aqui.
Good evening. João Sérgio Ribeiro, School of Law of University of Minho, Universidade de Minho. I'd like to thank your inspiring presentations, but also very disturbing. I think technology is a wonderful thing, solves lots of problems in medicine and makes our lives much easier, but it should be regulated. If we regulate, if we stop the baker from adding too much salt to our breads, why can't we regulate technology? Technology can be very dangerous. I don't want to offend people who like robots. They can be very useful. They can put out fires and do dangerous things instead of human beings. But it was very disturbing to see that image of robots playing and people, just gazing at them, because it was very enlightening in a way. Because until a certain point, technology was driven by profit, of course, but was at the man's service to make our lives easier. We needed people to operate the machines and so forth. So people were not redundant until a certain point. But now the machines are becoming to be the center. And in the future, if you use robots for everything, people will be redundant. And then it will work against the people who own these machines, because they won't have consumers. It's like heading for the disaster. And it can be dangerous technology as well, like Wi-Fi. Everyone needs Wi-Fi, but you can't opt out. You want to go to a park, and you have to be, you don't know what it does to you. Of course, people say, oh, it's not a problem, low frequencies, but you never know. You have the right to take precautions to protect your own children. So my point is technology should be regulated. It's not a good in itself. And relating this to ethics, man should be in the center. Technology is to serve men. And societies, politicians, people in general should have the right to protect themselves. Because sometimes they are manipulated by these machines. They are alienating themselves. They are being controlled by the owners of these products, these social networks and so forth. And people should stop to think. So we have the right to regulate. And that's my statement, my final statement. Thank you.
José Mendonça from Inesc Tech. My comment, and I would like you to comment on my comment, would argue that it seems that there is a divide between the engineers or technical people that see in technology many good things, and the people from the humanities and social sciences that portray fears. And the issue is that, are we really in control of technology? And I just take 15 seconds to tell you a short story I heard many years ago. I don't know who told me that. Lao Tse once was in the bottom of a mountain, and he saw up there a man riding on a horse and coming down very furiously, very fast, almost killing himself down the mountain. And when he came down, Lao Tse said to the animal, "Show," and he stopped. And he asked the guy riding the horse, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I don't know, ask the horse." So it looks like we are riding the technology, but we are not sure on where are we going to. So I think the people from social science and humanistics are the ones in the horse, and the engineers are, allowed to say, controlling. So I would like you to comment on that.
Okay, very nice. Thank you very much. Andrea, you'll start? Okay, thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you very much for these stimulating observations. On the first thing, I agree on the general concern that you express. It goes to confirm, however, that once again, when we think of the possible unintended consequences of technologies, we think mostly in negative terms. We think in terms of the risks, we think in terms of misuses. I think it's interesting to see. We did recently a survey, an umbrella survey of how technological future has been described in literature, movies, over the past 70 or 80 years, since even a little bit more, since the 20s of the latest century. 95% of the pictures that emerge from this kind of review are dystopias, are negative pictures, are somehow expressing the fears rather than the hopes. Now, there must be a cultural reason for that. My personal answer, I tried to hint at it in my talk, is that this is due to insufficient information, is due to a lack of capability on behalf of those who formulate this dystopian future to imagine or value or measure, if only potentially, the positive side of technologies, because clearly there is a huge positive side in, let's say, most technologies. So how do we get out of that? I think that the pillars of responsible research and innovation that I briefly sketched, most of them address this issue: science education, early engagement. These are the long-term solutions. Of course, you won't see the results tomorrow morning. As soon as you start talking about a cultural change, cultural paradigm change, you must count in terms of generations, or at least in terms of decades, but not in terms of years. But I think there's no other way to go. Regulation. Of course, there is regulation, there need be regulation, and there is regulation, because when we look at safety standards, when we look at, I mean, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, mainly for environmental concerns, there has been a plethora of regulations that constrain the market of technologies, so it's extremely concrete. But it's not the only answer. I don't think that we can rely on regulation on behalf of a benevolent and omniscient state that knows what's good and what's bad for citizens. This is the trap of the ethical state, which I think is something we should avoid, try to fall in.
So that's a very, very interesting question, and I think you put the finger right on the real problem, except you use the wrong words, because you say regulate technology. You don't regulate technology, you regulate the use of technology, from my perspective. Sorry, I'm just trying to be polemic here. But on the other hand, you think of the several revolutions, industrial revolutions. It's clear that they disrupted the way people were living, and they created new challenges and new opportunities. And think of, and I know that in Portugal this has been very polemic, Uber. But think of Uber, the shared economy, and what is Uber? Uber is just an application, it's just a piece of software, okay? Except it's a piece of software that completely changed the way people grab taxis. In Pittsburgh, where I live, it's impossible to get a taxi. You call the taxi company and they tell you, yeah, maybe I'll be there in half an hour. And I can tell you when I'll be there. Oh, doesn't matter. You have the Uber here, a platform. You see, oh, it's 3 minutes away. But more importantly, I can land in Porto, and if I didn't have a cab there, I think I could use Uber also. And if not in Porto, in any place in the world. What I'm saying is, Uber will have to address all the issues of the drivers having to be certified, and insurance and all those things. But the point is that there is a new technology out there that completely changed the game of how people get local transportation, okay? And tomorrow, why should I have a car? I don't need a car. Pay insurance, go to the garage, do all sorts of things. Why? Just grab. I was in California 2 weeks ago, a city I didn't have any idea of where I was. Every day I grabbed the Uber, crossed the street, the car came, stopped and took me. So there is a game changer there, okay? You need to take care of everything else, but we cannot ignore that the things will be different in the future, okay? And so that's one issue. Now, the other issue that your question raises is why, and people discuss that in the United States, why is it that after the Great Recession of 2008, and with Obama being extremely nice and extremely good president and bringing 200,000 new jobs every month or something like that, why is it that those jobs are not paying as they used to pay? So the question that raises is, are the new jobs, the jobs of the new the new industry, are they high-paying jobs, or are the high-paying jobs only for the top 0.1%, 0.01%, and the masses are going to be with jobs that don't pay? Okay, so that's the real question. And the easy answer is no longer, oh, just take a good degree at the university and that solves the problem. Because with computers that we didn't talk about, but with Watson and computers becoming intelligent, are we guaranteed that our job will still be a high-paying job? Those are the hard questions. Anyway, José Manuel Mendonça, are the technologies the ones riding the horse or stopping the horse? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have at least two persons, that Pedro over there and Álvaro here in the middle. Okay, and I think, as far as I see, will be the last ones. Please.
Good evening. I'm Pedro Granja from the Institute for Biomedical Engineering here at the University of Porto. Thank you for the fascinating lectures. I would like to start by a comment and then ask a question. My comment is, one of the issues that was not quite discussed here is the potential impact of biotechnology in general, and especially related to health, which, in my point of view, has an even bigger potential impact in our lives than the technologies we have been discussing here. Also, maybe it's even more difficult to discuss. So I would like to ask you, what is your view on the use of these technologies and others in our future, taking into account all the game changers in biotechnology and their potential to change our lives in the sense of improving our lifespan, for instance, even maybe allowing us to enhance ourselves. So with real game changers, with significant impacts in our lives, maybe even with more profound ethical and moral issues. And one of the questions I'd like to ask is, do we even have the luxury of discussing these moral and ethical issues in a globalized world where it doesn't really matter what we discuss in Europe, that then will be done differently in China? For instance, we remember when in the States during the Bush administration, they tried to ban research on stem cells, just to comment also on the possibility of stopping or banning or regulating any kind of research. And then the main research groups just moved to China or started working with private funds. So I would like to ask you to comment on that.
Thank you. Álvaro, please.
I would like to make a comment and a question. And my comment is the following. I have the feeling that in the discussion we are with a trend, a very pessimistic trend in relation to the future impact of technology. It's a trend? I am not so sure, but at least it's a trend in this room, in this discussion. I know of two sectors of our societies, in a global way, that are very optimistic about the future impact of technology. One are citizens. In particular, let me speak of citizens in China. I went to China when I was doing my report, and I found the young Chinese very optimistic about the future of their role in the society, exactly because of information technology. They feel they were being empowered by technology, and that the ability of the Chinese Communist Party and Chinese state to control them was weaker, even if they were using the same technology. That was almost impossible to the Chinese Communist Party to stop citizens of writing in Weibo, the Chinese Twitter and Facebook, what they would like to say. So this is a sector that is optimistic about the future. Another sector that is quite optimistic about the future, and that perhaps will be part of my question, is people that are concerned with ecology, that are concerned with climate change. Of course, we know that climate change is the greatest threat that we are facing to human development and to our future quality of life of citizens of the world. But people have a lot of hope that technology will help in confronting climate change. So my question is two, in fact. What are the technologies of the future that will contribute more to empower citizens, that will make a young Chinese more able to confront the Chinese regime and spread its own ideas in a society that is quite close? And what are the technologies that will help us to face climate change? Is that a game changer?
Thank you very much. We'll start with you.
Okay, on biotech, I'm not an expert in biotech. What I think is that this is an area where we are in a clear transition period where we're trying to learn, not only learn the technology, but learn the implications of technology. And it has happened in the past for many other technologies, and there is inevitably a trial and error process, which most states try to control. In my country, there are ethical committees all over the place to monitor, steer, and try to support the research community in making the right choices. And I'm sure this is the case in most other countries as well. But nobody has the sufficient evidence. I'm not talking about the ethical debate, because the ethical debate clearly is important, but first and foremost, one asks oneself an ethical question if it's worthwhile asking such a question, until and unless we understand exactly what are the implications of certain developments in biotech. Probably the ethical question remains theoretical. So I can only say that I think we need inevitably to go through a process of trial and error, where there will be errors, therefore. In terms of globalization, that's a big issue, because the drivers, the example you made about this stem cell company which left the States and went working elsewhere, clearly here the drive is economic. And there is little we can do in a free market economy to avoid these things to happen, and probably they are part of the trial and error process. So I think the best we can do is to make sure that we gather as much evidence as possible, and that we monitor the process through regulation. On the optimism, I think there's many areas where we have to be optimistic in terms of technological development. I would definitely add at least a third to the two that you mentioned, which is the one of new materials. I think new materials is an area where there is a potential for fantastic breakthroughs from the point of view not only of sheer technology performance, but from the point of view of societal impact. We start now talking about all the graphene applications, but there's plenty others. So I think that, again, the pessimism that you note, I also note it, but I think it's I was trying to say earlier as well, it is the result of a lack of evidence and of maybe a constitutional attitude of men to start thinking about fear before thinking about hope. I don't know. But there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic. In the ecologic, well, here it's my view, I recognize it is a biased one, but my view is that technology will not save the world from climate change alone. I think we need badly to have more technology that help us, but the numbers are there. I mean, if we don't curb to some extent the generation of nuisances through behavioral changes, there is no chance that technology will allow us to solve the problem in the long term. So definitely we should be optimistic, but we should accompany the heavy research work that is being carried out with something else.
Thank you. So on the biotechnology, of course, I don't know how to answer your questions. I think that when you state, oh, how can we ask, I know it's a rhetorical question, but how can we ask, how can we discuss ethical questions in a globalized world? I think that in the end, all of us bear responsibility, and so all of us need to keep discussing and try to make sure that whatever we say and defend is heard by others, and maybe we'll be able to conquer. But I agree that we can't stand still, because these are all very, very difficult questions. Now, I am an enthusiast for technology. I am a very positive person, actually, and so if I sounded negative, I apologize. But on the contrary, I'm fascinated, actually, by technology. I'm fascinated, and I only realized that in the last couple of years, when I was on sabbatical in 2013, 2014, that's really when it hit me that we are at a different point in our lives, and we are lucky that we are all living that. But I believe I'm going to be stronger than you were, because I do believe that technology will solve practically all our problems, okay? Maybe a few. So that's how optimistic I am. But what technologies will empower young Chinese? You said, when were you in China? 2 years ago? You should go back, because I wasn't there, but my wife was. And she couldn't read email. She couldn't use Google. She was and of course, as we speak, she's reading her email wherever she is. I don't know where she is, but wherever she is, she's reading email, okay? She had to live 3 or 4 days without reading email and without accessing Google, without accessing whatever sites she wanted. So you better go back and revise your report, because the young Chinese now, the Communist Party of China figured out how to control those. Oh, go there, go there, go there, go there. So anyway, it's clear that there will always be this push me, pull you, and we'll just need to keep going after. Regarding the climate change, I don't know, renewables, carbon sequestration, solar, I don't know. Luis knows much better than I do, so maybe he wants to answer that.
Thank you very much. I think we are. I think we are coming to an end of this very interesting evening. I will, of course, I will also. I need to say that, of course, I am really a believer on technology and on the future, and I think the horizons that of the future are so large and so fascinating that, of course, we, or at least some of us, may fear the unknown. I think this is something that is expectable, but at least I do believe that, yes, I believe in the future.
Can I say one thing about the technology? Because I remember I wanted to say that and I forgot. So if you look at the 20th century, what we did with technology was like this. We invented cars, or Ford invented the cars, and he didn't invent, but he produced them massively. And we were fascinated with cars. We didn't think about these consequences. And our task in the 21st century is to look back at all those problems that we created and try to correct them. Looking forward, that means we look at technology, but we also need to look at the consequences in the environment and all those things of technology. Okay, so it's a slightly different attitude.
Before we produce the car, we need to think.
Before you produce the car, you need to think exactly what is the consequence of producing the car.
Okay. I'm going to ask a last comment to each of our speakers and thanking them all what they shared with us. And this last comment is very much aligned what is the rationale behind these conferences that was organized by Álvaro Vasconcelos. So on the definition of the rationale behind, Álvaro stated very well that one of the questions we may have in the future in 2030, or that at least we have today, is to try to figure out that in some years' time, how is going to be concentration of power, of knowledge, of capital. The world that we have in 2030 will be more concentrated, and a few of us can be, a few countries can be, a short percentage of the population will concentrate the power, the knowledge, money, the capital, or all these assets will be spread or better spread among the population and among countries and all over the world. So please, can I have your last comment on this statement? Because this is really one of the reasons of the objectives to make this, one of the questions that Álvaro made and put us thinking to make these conferences.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks very much. This has been very interesting, hopefully for you, but certainly for me. Two things. One, I'd like about the unintended social consequences of technology. As a friend recently told me the following anecdote. He said, you know, that's a British guy. He uses to go to pubs all the time. So he said, you know, you went to the pub, you sat with a beer, and you started a discussion, who won the World Cup in 1987? And then we could discuss the whole evening trying to reconstruct this. Now you ask the question, guy, finished, no discussion, because got the answer in 25 milliseconds on his iPhone. So probably drinks more beer since. So I don't know, this is micro, but our life is full of micro things, so I think let's consider them. No, my only last comment would be that I think we hadn't, José and myself hadn't prepared this thing jointly, right? Maybe you have realized that. But I think we were indeed rather complementary and rather, I would say, in agreement on most things. The one thing I would like to remark on which I think we are not completely in agreement, because I think it's something that came up more than once, is the question of user responsibility. Indeed, once the product is there, it is the user's responsibility. But it is a responsibility which is constrained and limited by the fact that there is a given product which is there, and all you can do is use it badly, well, or not use it, but that's your limitation in exerting a responsibility as a citizen. What I'm trying to argue is that indeed, once the product is there, it is the user, but the responsibility for actually having a given technology penetrating the market in a certain direction with certain applications cannot be left to the libero arbitrio. I don't know how this can be said in English, so the free choice of the users, which is not really a free choice, because he is put in a situation where the only choice he has is to use in a way or in another way the product that is there. So we'll talk again about this.
I just want to thank everybody in the audience for the questions, and I think that the questions were great questions, and thank you very much for inviting me here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will dare to try to summarize everything that we heard tonight, and if we are already in the knowledge society, the knowledge society is about learning, and learning is the key word for the learning society. But the society that we heard about and that we have been discussing is a society of the wisdom, was the word used by José, Fonseca and Moura. And wisdom is something that we need to learn a lot, but we need to develop it, because it's a much more, much challenging, and I think this will be a very nice society. Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you very much to Luís and to Serralves Foundation, and of course to all of our consultants. And thank you very much for you all for this very nice evening.